I'll be sharing with you in this video how to deal with patterns and resistance when creating your vision, because I think that what we might neglect a lot of the times is that when we're creating something, patterns of resistance and old parts of who you are, inevitably so, are going to come up. I think that if we walk through life with a proper expectation that old versions of us that are out of alignment with the vision that we committed to are going to come up to the surface, what starts to happen is that we can much more easily embody who it is that we choose to be. And so the first thing that I want to share with you in this video in terms of how to actually deal with these patterns is to understand that discipline is not about being perfect. And what that really means is that you're going to make mistakes. You might set on a vision and you really wholeheartedly believe that you're going to commit to something. And then what happens is that you somehow convince yourself that you shouldn't do it anymore. You should stop. And I think that discipline is understanding that it's not about being perfect. It's not that you're going to follow through with your vision 24/7 and you're going to perfectly align with that identity that you said that you were. It's really just about starting there. Before I move on to anything else in this video, I just want to make it clear, just keep that in mind as you go through your life, that you're going to make mistakes. So you're not going to follow through sometimes. You're going to be too tired to take action on the thing that you said that you wanted to take sometimes. Sometimes your resistance will get to you. You will live into old patterns. Sometimes it might happen. Now, I'm not trying to be cynical here. I'm not trying to create a negative perspective here. But at some point, as you walk through life, you start to notice that there's parts of you that are reoccurring patterns, like parts of you that maybe you don't like, parts of you that maybe you don't really like about yourself. And the truth is that we like to walk through life, we like to point fingers and say that this person's being wrong. This is why these are all the reasons why my life is bad and this, and we like to blame, point fingers. But the question is, where are you doing the thing that you're blaming out there? Where are you doing that? Where are you actually doing the thing that you're pointing fingers at? They're saying that you don't like. It's like you're pointing and say, but where are you taking accountability for where you're doing the exact thing that you don't like in the other? Because everything really ultimately, not always, but a lot of the times, of course, you've heard it before, life can be a reflection. A lot of times people can just have their own problems and it's not a reflection of you. That can also happen as well. But a lot of times it can be a reflection, so it depends on the moment. But nonetheless, whatever the case is, regardless of the external stuff happening, you have to understand that, you don't have to, but I highly invite and encourage you just to keep in mind that mistakes are going to happen. Just start there. Before we talk about anything else, before we move on to anything else in the video, just start there. Keep in mind, have a proper expectation that sometimes chaos will happen. Let me say it like this. Things won't always go according to plan perfectly. You might have a plan, you might think that it's going to go from A to B to C to D, but then you might even skip B and C and go straight to D and E, and there's an easier path. Or maybe it might look like things are happening harder, but then it becomes a lot easier if you just understand that chaos can happen sometimes, and it's going to happen. So rather than being surprised that a test or a challenge is going to happen when you're creating something, you see it as just yet another reason to be more disciplined. And then so what happens is that, paradoxically so, when you understand that discipline is not about being perfect and you're going to make mistakes, you learn from your mistakes faster. Whereas one person, maybe they get into a downward spiral, maybe they last there for weeks, maybe months. Whereas if you start to build the skill set of kind of putting yourself into a good mood, even when you're not, you train yourself to just be happy when you don't want to be, to take action and just do stuff that makes you feel better, even if you don't feel like it. When you just do that over and over and over, you build a certain level of self-trust. And self-trust comes through action. And action comes through willingness to take action before even feeling like it. But remember, when the chaos happens, when things are not perfect, when mistakes are happening, when chaos does unfold, when things do happen out of order, what do you do in that situation? Are you going to resist and then add more levels of resistance on top of the situation that's already happening and create more stress? Are you going to say, okay, well, you know what? This has happened so many times that this is normal. What I have to understand is that this happens sometimes and this is okay. And then from there, if you make a mistake and if you spiral and make a mistake or do something that maybe you didn't want to do, or maybe you just got lost in some sort of haze that you didn't like about yourself, and you were being a type of way that you didn't like. The second thing that I want to share with you in this video is that once you realize that you did that, you realize that maybe you got a little bit too carried away with something. Maybe you were just a little bit too attached to your thinking. Maybe you just a little bit too attached to your ego, and you didn't realize what was going on. The key there from here, in my opinion, is to forgive yourself. Because the faster that you can forgive yourself for whatever it is that you're doing in your life, however it is that you're acting, the faster you can get back into discipline and consistency and excellence and being the person that you know you have to be to get the results that you want in your life. It's just about consistency, but you're not going to be consistent if you're still lingering about the mistakes that you made and why you couldn't do it and why you may as well just not do it because you're already not doing it, and then you go from there, right? But an upward spiral is I'm already doing it, so I may as well continue. I'm already in a momentum state, so I may as well just keep doing it because it feels easier to do it than not to do it. But then when you're in a state of a negative spiral, it doesn't seem like that. Even taking the first step seems so heavy and so difficult. But the key is to forgive yourself and to remember that what do you care about most in your life? What do you value most? Well, because remember, when you're dealing with patterns of resistance, what's usually happening is that your value system is out of alignment. So what needs to happen is there has to be a little bit of a, sort of an investigation on what are you valuing in that moment? Because really, it's important to remember, in my opinion, you choose your values. Nobody can decide your values for you. But it's important to remember that if there's resistance coming up and you have a desire to let go of this quote unquote resistance, really what it's coming down to is that you value your state of peace more than getting a result in the future. And so what that means is that you still want the thing that you want. There's nothing wrong with desire, but it's coming from a different place. It's coming from a different essence. It's almost like you're aligned with something just a little bit deeper than your ego, just a little bit deeper than the surface level of who you are. You're aligning with something much greater than yourself, and your emotional compass becomes activated again. When you forgive yourself, your emotional compass becomes activated because now you can walk through life and you do have an intuition once again for, are you taking the correct action? I think that we all should be living with more instinct and more trust in our instinct and in our feeling, because when you do have a clear intention, when you do know what it is that you want to create, and you have forgiven yourself, now your emotional compass is almost like at a much higher capacity. You have more capacity, more space, more spaciousness to be aware of what's really stopping you from not aligning with who you said that you wanted to be. Where do you value something that you think you value, but you don't? You really don't, but you convincing yourself you do, but you know that you don't like to do that thing. So it's important to look at that and say that, you know what? I don't actually value this. This is not what I want. Get back into alignment with your discipline, with your vision, with what you care about. And so the third and final thing that I want to share with you in this video, just to include, is just to remember that, with that being said, with this understanding that mistakes are normal, that you can forgive yourself moving forward. The conclusion here is just to remember that, if you feel stagnated, the real question is, how long do you want to stay in stagnation? How long do you want to stay there? Because remember, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You're going to, let's just get it out of the way here. Your ego is going to take over sometimes. And I'm sorry to just throw that on you. Of course, maybe that's not the best thing to say. But for me, it's a realistic way to see life because it's going to happen. Sometimes we don't follow through. We do things that we don't want to be doing, that we don't really care to do, that we don't like. It's okay to see that part of us come up, because I think that the beautiful thing to realize is that you don't need to stay there for as long as you believe. So with this in mind, that it's going to happen, not to be cynical, but if you have this understanding, the question is, how quickly can you get out of it? How fast can you learn your mistakes? How fast can you learn your lessons? Because lessons everybody's going to have. And if you believe that you don't have lessons and you think that things are just going to be perfect and bunnies and roses, well, then the truth is that, in my personal opinion, Be prepared for a rude awakening, because what's going to start to happen is that the chaos is going to unfold anyway, but you're not going to be prepared for it. You're not going to be prepared for it. And that might sound like a fear-based mentality, but for me, I just think that comes from what I've seen in my life to be the case, that chaos happens. Order is one level of life. Chaos is inevitably going to happen. So the question is, how much preparation do you have for the chaos to navigate that and let that go faster than the average person? Where you catch yourself in those downward spirals and you snap yourself out of it and you take action faster. Rather than lingering there for days, months, weeks, it becomes minutes, perhaps even seconds, and then you just keep getting back into alignment with who you want to be again and again and again, where now it's almost like you don't even get lost in these states anymore and you're just in a flow state consistently. But in order to get to that point, what has to happen is that value system has to change. Something about how you see yourself and what you care about in your life has to change. Are you valuing perhaps money over your state of consciousness and your peace? Are you valuing perhaps maybe a job or something that an item or something that you want to buy or whatever, like whatever the case is, right? If there's something out there that you're valuing more than who it is that you're embodying and what you actually have control over in your life and the variables that you can control, what's happening is that you're quite literally making a decision to give away your power. And if you're making a decision to give away your power, whether conscious or unconscious, that is a choice. But in my opinion, what I think I want to communicate here is to make that process conscious. Consciously make that choice. Because if you were going to be making choices, why not do them consciously? Why not take responsibility and accountability over the fact that when we're giving away our power, we're doing that to ourselves. No more blaming, no more, oh, this is happening and this is making me feel this way and all this type of thinking where that's not true ultimately, because you're making yourself feel things. Nobody has ever made you feel anything. You only make yourself feel things because of the way that you interpret the situation and because of the way that you see the situation. Your interpretation of the situation has the ability to change the situation, but you have to believe it first. So just remember, stagnation is going to happen, but how long do you want to stay there? Get out of that state faster. Catch yourself. If you're, attached to anger, you're attached to resentment, if you're attached to some sort of negative emotion, it's like, why are you doing this to yourself? Ask yourself, why am I doing this to myself, right? And when you ask yourself this question, follow that up with, how long do I want to stay in this? Is it really worth it? Is it worth it? Pull back, create more spaciousness, and do what is necessary once again to not be stagnated, because we know the solution. We know what we have to do. Oftentimes we convince ourselves that we don't know what we have to do. But the truth is we know. Our heart and our soul deep inside knows, with our emotional compass, exactly what we need to be doing. And even not to get too airy-fairy here, at a logical level too, you know what you have to do to get the results that you want in your life. Like we all know. We all know what we have to do. The thing is that we lie to ourselves because we believe that we value something else that we don't really. We don't really value that thing, but then we walk through life and we believe that we do, and then we go through that process and we realize that no, actually that's not the truth. Here's what I really value, and then that process becomes faster when you ask yourself, how long do you want to stay in those episodes of unconsciousness and attachment to a negative emotion that you don't even want to be in your life, that you don't want to embody, that you don't want to see as an embodiment of your truth? Because again, it's going to happen, but to allow it to play longer than necessary, that's up to you. Patterns can play out, but why repeat them? If a negative emotion happens, let it happen for once and just one time only. Why add more stress on top of it? Why create more layers of resistance on top of a negative emotion because you believe it shouldn't be happening? Because you believe, oh, why is this happening to me? Because you believe like, oh, this shouldn't be happening, but you're not seeing the lesson. The lesson is always there. The opportunity is always there. The question is, are you able to see it in that way? To actually interpret it as a lesson so that you don't need to be repeating the same mistakes over and over, and then you start to have more embodied